Hey, Michael with XForcePC, here to talk to you about a new system we put together. And the case I have here in front of me, and this is just an empty case obviously, is the case that we build our RTX system in. And from time to time we get asked by customers to build something smaller. Maybe they need to move things around, they don't have a lot of space, maybe they're going to take it on vacation with them, whatever the reason might be, they want something built in a smaller case. And we've done this before, and well, now we're doing it again. So again, this is our RTX system, which is one of our highest end systems, and we've essentially shrunk it down and created something that we're calling the RTX Mini. And where the term RTX comes from is essentially these systems are based around NVIDIA's new RTX graphics cards, which support ray tracing and deep learning super sampling, which of course almost no games support yet, but in the future they probably will. Now, you may ask yourself, well, why wouldn't someone just buy this every single time instead of the RTX? It's smaller and it's just a shrunk down version of the RTX. Well, that's true, but when you shrink something like this, you do have to make some compromises, and they're not big compromises, but we're going to talk about those now. So what you gain when you go from the RTX system to the RTX Mini is obviously a much smaller size, and the dimensions are right there on our website. But I believe the height is 11 inches on this. The width is fairly narrow, narrower than your typical case. And the depth is also less, not significantly less, but less. And so again, what you're getting here is essentially the smaller size. Now the big question is, what are you giving up? Well, if you want to put it into one simple sentence, that is, you're giving up overclocking. The RTX system is an overclocked system. The RTX Mini is a standard clock system. And to put it quite simply, what you do is you give up 10% performance, that's the overclock, and you get a reduction in heat of like 50%. So to get that last 10% of performance requires approximately 50% more heat and electricity, because when you overclock, you have to throw more voltage at the processor, which results in more heat. Obviously, in a smaller case with not as many fans and openings and so forth, you can't stand that extra heat. Now we could push the issue, but we're not really wanting to do that. So again, in simplest terms, the big difference is this is not an overclocked system. You give up 10% performance and you get back 50% of the heat production and power usage. So let's talk about this thing in a little more depth now. Now the base processor that comes with this is the i5-9600K. And that processor has a base frequency of 3.6 gigahertz and a turbo frequency of up to 4.6. And you might say, what does that mean? Well, what it means is the processor speed, well, you'll get at least that 3.6 gigahertz. But if the conditions are right, there's enough power, cooling, stability, you might get as much as 4.6 gigahertz. And as you probably know, the RTX system's overclocked to 4.8. So not a huge difference there. Now, I will tell you that most of the time the system runs, when it's running X-Plane or other programs, at around 4.4 gigahertz. Obviously, we have really good power delivery in here and really good cooling. And again, the system will typically clock at about 4.4. So you're talking a difference between 4.8 and 4.4. And that's where you get your 10% difference in performance. The other processor you can choose is it's an 8-core processor, the 9700K. And that processor has a base frequency of 3.6 and a max turbo frequency of 4.9, I believe. I'm doing this off the top of my head. And again, that just means that it can turbo up as high as 4.9. And you're at least going to get that 3.6. The typical is probably going to be around 4.6 gigahertz is what you would see in day-to-day usage, as opposed to the 5 gigahertz you get on that same chip in the RTX system. Again, about 10% difference in performance. and that's where that comes from, is that frequency difference. Now, some other things that differentiate this system from a typical small form factor system. This is considered a small form factor. It's based on a Mini-ITX motherboard, which is one of the smallest motherboards available. Well, one thing that differentiates this is it uses a full-size power supply. So essentially the same power supply you'd find in the RTX system, you'll also find in the RTX Mini. It's a full-size 700-watt power supply, and it has component cables, meaning that we only have to hook up the cables to the power supply that are absolutely necessary, and then all those other extraneous cables we give you, and we put them into a little box and provide that to you in case you need them in the future. I'm not sure how you would need them or why you would need them. But the fact that it uses a standard size power supply is very handy. You know, if that ever goes out years down the road, you know, obviously you can come to us, but if for whatever reason you wanted to get a power supply on your own, you're not having to go around and hunt down some weird sized or weird oriented power supply. A regular 700 watt power supply is what we use in here. Now, it's also got a full-size graphics card. The graphics card on this system runs along the bottom here, and the ports for it are on the back, right back here. And so the card goes, you know, probably back to here, all the way this length. So actually the same graphics card we use in here, we use in the RTX system. So there's no compromise on the graphics card for this system. So as I mentioned earlier, really the main compromise you're making is the overclocking. Otherwise, it essentially has all the functionality of the RTX system with some extremely minor differences. Obviously, there's not as many internal hard drive bays. There's not as many expansion slots, but nobody uses expansion slots these days. So really the big difference is that 10% in overclocking. Now, just to talk about a few of the finer details, you do have front USB, so we've got, I'm kind of craning my neck here, 2 front USB 3.0s. You've got the power button right here, and a headphone and a microphone jack right here. So this is the front of the case, and so these would be kind of on the right side on the front. In the back, we have multiple USB ports, 3.0, 2.0. We also have a gigabit Ethernet port. There's also Wi-Fi, wireless AC, which is the latest Wi-Fi or wireless technology. So you have a couple of antennas that you can screw in. Obviously, we have some ports to plug your speakers in. And then, of course, the graphics card has multiple graphics outputs, so it can support up to 4 displays, just like the RTX system. So that's some of the finer details. If you have any questions, you can send us an email. It's xforcesales@gmail.com. Again, that is xforcesales@gmail.com.